Welcome to Adventure Unfiltered. The podcast is just over a week old and I've been absolutely blown away by the response to the very first episode. So many of you reached out to say how deeply Iona's story landed with you, how her honesty about identity, motherhood and evolving adventure echoes things you've felt in your own life. And she really was the perfect first guest. We have history and connection and that lovely spark that happens the moment we're together. Our conversation was powerful because of what she shared. Two friends after a sea swim talking about the things that matter. My second guest was different. Sean Green is someone I didn't know. We had never spoken before. I'd seen his photos on Instagram. I remembered the BBC feature about riding all 282 Munros. I knew the broad strokes like the big mountains, the big days and the big ambition. But there's a particular vulnerability in reaching out to a complete stranger and saying, hey, will you sit with me? Will you trust me with your story? And honestly, I felt nervous. From the moment we started speaking, I realised how grounded, humble and open Sean is. There's a real gentleness in the way he talks, a kindness that puts you at ease instantly. And what struck me most was that behind everything he's achieved, there was no ego, just someone who loves the hills, loves his family and follows the ideas that light him up. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have known, was the depth and honesty behind it all. How grief shaped his relationship with the hills. How curiosity carried him further than confidence ever could. And the moment, mid-interview, when he told me he had broken his neck in a racing accident merely months after completing his Munro round. It was one of those moments where the air changes, where you realise this conversation isn't really about mountain biking. It's about resilience, curiosity, and the magnetic pull the wild has on some of us. And in that moment, I knew this is exactly the kind of story Adventure Unfiltered was made for. Sean's story is about resilience, imagination, identity, and the thin line between risk and purpose. It's about why we go into the wild and why we keep going back. So let's go. Here's Sean Green and the kind of honesty that reminds us that in the wild, we remember who we are. Sean Green, welcome to Adventure Unfiltered podcast. You are the second guest on season 1, and oh my gosh, what a treat the listeners are in for today. Your story is just absolutely wild. 282 Munros by mountain bike. So for anyone outside of Scotland, the Munros are our 282 mountains over 3,000 feet.
I'm honoured to be considered for season 1.
I'm really keen to dig down and find out where on earth that idea came from. But before we get there, Sean, for anybody that doesn't know you or doesn't follow your social media channels, who is Sean Green?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for that blinding introduction. Sean Green is just somebody who likes being in the outdoors, very much a family man. If it can involve bikes, that makes me even happier. And I just kind of get sometimes carried away with little ideas in my head. I'm not the sort of person, I've never thought, oh, I'm going to set out with all these challenges or anything like that. It started off as something very minuscule, purely for my own enjoyment, and then it just snowballed into whatever this is that it's become.
Isn't it always the smallest ideas that turn into the biggest things? So where did that love for adventure begin for you then? Was it always part of your story?
Yeah, I think it's sort of come from my family as a whole. Growing up, whenever my dad had come back from offshore, we would just be away instantly. The van would either be packed as soon as he got home or packed ready for us to leave when he got back. And most weekends we would spend in Skye, Gairloch, Durness, Fort William, just anywhere really. Glencoe, like we were just always out in the hills. It was just kind of all I knew. I've got some family photos of, me in like a fish box, for example, sleeping in a fish box. I think I'm probably about 6 months old. I think the first photos I've seen of me in a papoose on my dad's back on his bike, I would have been less than a year. I climbed Ben Nevis when I was 4, I think. It was just sort of the world that I was born into, and probably the the thing that I'd like to thank, particularly my dad, most for is just giving me that start to life.
I've got a really similar photo, like you were talking about there, of me and the papoose on my dad's back when I was tiny up the mountains.
All I knew is that, when dad was home, we were sort of away. And yeah, I've just sort of carried it into my adult life.
I think that's lovely, and what a gift that is our parents gave us, the gift of the outdoors. So, Sean, talk me through where on earth the idea came from to ride 282 Munros by mountain bike, obviously levelling up from the trails to something bigger, bolder, and maybe less sensible.
It's been called worse things than that. I'll take less sensible. Like biking's kind of been my life. It's been my main sport, my entire life. I'm 36 now and I've been riding sort of seriously for over 20 odd years, 25, 26 years. When I really started to get into it, and I've always loved big hills a lot more so than, little tight wooded areas where most of Scotland or even the UK's trails are situated. They're in the trees to protect them from the weather, and I've always just wanted more and bigger. So there was obviously I'd always been walking in the hills, and I think as a kid, like whenever we were up in Munro, or not even in Munro, I didn't even know what they were probably until my adult life. I just knew them as hills. Whenever we were coming down, I would always sort of pretend I was holding a set of handlebars. That's how I'd run down the hills, pretending I was on a bike. Just as kids do when they're in the back of the car and you're going away somewhere and you're pretending you're jumping all this stuff. I just took it that step further, and I think I never really grew out of that. So whenever I was walking anywhere into my adult life, I'd be walking and think, this would be pretty good on a bike. Even if it was only 10 meters of riding, I'd say, oh, I wish I'd brought my bike. And one weekend, I think I'd been trail building quite locally, and it sort of looks out across the Strathmore Flats towards the Cairngorms. And I think I just decided, right, the next ride, I'm just going to head for the hills. And I'd one of my usual spots was up Glen Clover in Glendale, and so I'd gone up there. I used to go up to Davies Burgh quite a lot, and then one time I'd gone up and I just decided to keep going. And obviously I bagged the two Munros, and then I was like, oh well, that was pretty amazing. I'm going to see what other ones are local, and after I think maybe 5 or 6, I was driving through Braemar and I stopped in at the outdoor shop there, and I just went and found the first Munro map I could find. And I had them all listed, and I remember driving home and walking in the house to my wife and just saying, "I'm going to ride my bike down all these mountains." That was just kind of it. Like I'd got a bug so fast, and I just thought, is this some kind of untapped source? Like, why isn't everybody doing this?
Oh my gosh, what on earth did your wife say to that?
Let me know when you're done. Were her exact words.
Yeah, yeah, I know exactly how that feels. I'm laughing because my husband, he is going to Nepal next Easter to ride the Annapurna circuit, and he asked me if I wanted to do it. And I mean, I can probably count on my both hands how many times I've been on a mountain bike, and I can also count on both hands how many times I've fallen off my mountain bike when I've been on it. So, yeah, when he came home and said, "I want to do this," and I was like, I checked it out on YouTube, and within 10 minutes, I was like, yeah, let me know when you're finished.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not really sure what her initial thoughts were. Yeah, I mean, she probably thought this is just going to be one of those things that'll drift off. You'll do a couple of bad ones, and
Yeah.
it'll be dead in the water. But it just sort of it never really happened. And at the beginning, everybody would always say to me, "Oh, what are you going to do about this one? And what are you going to do about that one?" I was like, "There's 282 of these mountains, and you're asking me about a single one, as if that one is going to put me off the idea of what could potentially be out there."
Yeah, and I take it the two that you mentioned there are the Anarchy Gift Ridge and the Inpin.
Well, much more than that. Obviously, there's Leotach and Chelach, all the whole of the Coolin, most Munros, to be honest. But yeah, there's the ones that have been, that people tried to. Oh, you're surely not going to do it there. Was the Enpin was obviously the one that gets highlighted the most.
What was that one like then?
The mountain itself was it was quite a testing day. Obviously, it was quite far into the project, Yeah, it was last summer, and it wasn't that I'd been putting it off. It was just, I'd initially gone to do it in 2019. We had a magazine and stuff set up, ready for it, and I was there with a photographer, and we'd done Skirmish first, and then we were making our way across the ridge to do the impin, and the weather sort of started blowing in, and it was our first day of like a week long trip, and we're like, "Oh, we'll save it for the best weather we can." And then obviously it was typical Sky weather, and it just rained the rest of the week. And then beyond that, because I was just fitting it between normal life, there's a lot of logistics involved in going to Skye. Especially if you're coming across on the East Coast, and then with carrying a bike, I wouldn't ever venture into the Coolin without a guide, just because it'd be so easy for me to get like Cragfast. Hike a bike with a bike on my back is pretty straightforward, but if I have to down climb, it's a whole different ballgame. So that's always sort of played on my mind. And then years would just pass and pass and pass, and I was like, right, I'm going to need to get this out of the way because I don't want it to get to like the last 10 Munros and the end pin's still in there. So I'd set it all in motion. I think I was going to be climbing it on a Friday, and then I got a call from my brother on Thursday night to say Dad's passed.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
It knocked me for six, for multiple reasons. Obviously, Skye was a very sentimental place to me, particularly to do with my dad. And then I don't know, it was a really, really profound feeling because I've never felt so much in my life that I needed to do something as continue to do the in-pin that next day. Like it was kind of almost like a sign that if you don't do it today, you're never going to do it because this is going to follow you around. And so I set off on the Friday morning and headed straight for the in-pin, and it was wet, it was windy, it was cold. So we were up and over, and I think it was about 35-mile-an-hour winds. It wasn't the best for photos. Once we dropped down, the relief, and there was a few tears, just because of the situation, and then there was surprisingly quite a bit more riding on the West Ridge of Scourgerig than I expected. So that was like a quite a pleasant surprise, because everybody always thinks, oh, the imp in this and imp in this. I'm like, that's what, 60, 70 meters of the whole mountain? Like, there's another 900 to play with, you know.
Yeah, Sean, I'm so sorry to hear about your dad. That must have been incredibly tough. Sometimes I think that you feel closer to people that are no longer here when you're on the mountains. I don't know what that is. I can't describe it, but I think it's really beautiful that you still went ahead and did the in-pin in honour of your dad, and it's such a incredibly tough time.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, like Skye was just a really, like I say, it's kind of where we went every weekend, and you know, every single trip we were there, like we'd always walk the Kerrang and regularly uh Old Man of Store, and like the Coolin had just always filled me with wonder. Every time you'd drive past at the Sligo and you just look up at these imposing mountains like you'd see in comic books, and I think to finally get up there, and even like before my dad passed, even he would ask me like, what are you going to do about the input, and are you still going to take the bike up, and so it all kind of just felt like it was meant to be.
This day aside, when you did the in-pin, was there any other mountains or days that you found particularly tough?
There's a couple that spring to mind for the toughest. The toughest day technically was also in the Coolin, and it was Skirningillion. Again, I'd done that quite near the end. I think it was possibly after the in-pin. Yeah, a couple of months after the in-pin, I'd done Skirningillion, and I'd done that via the West Ridge as well, as opposed to the tourist route, which maybe would have made a bit more sense. But yeah, we just fancied a wee bit of a challenge, and just the sort of gradient of the climbing. It just kind of meant with the bike on my back, because I needed to have my hands free. I was fully crouched over the whole day, and then for the return trip as well, and for the abseils, like everything was just the rocks sort of, there was odd overhangs for having a bike dangling over your shoulders. Not not if you were walking it. It's probably quite straightforward in that respect. But when there's bits that dangle sort of 3, 4 foot either side of you, all of a sudden your center of gravity is all over the place. Mentally, the hardest thing I've ever done over the course of this project has been the Muller round. I wanted to do it in one trip, so I'd planned to do it in 2 or 3 days with the tent and the bar roll, all my camping gear, and just make a proper adventure of it. Try not rush around it. And after the sort of first hour and a half, it started raining, and then it proceeded to rain for about the next 36 hours.
Oh, typical Scotland, eh?
Yeah, that trip very nearly broke me. 12 Munros, nearly 60 kilometres, 16,000 foot of ascent.
Jeez.
Probably the best part of 40 kilos.
Geez, Sean, that's a mammoth day. I think, to be fair, that would break anyone. Let's talk about your setup. So, how did this work, Sean? Did you have to take the bike apart? Did you just carry it over your head? Was there a bit of both? How did it all work?
There's a few different ways I do things. For the most part, the bike is I'm just holding it on my shoulders. Probably just like you would squat with a bar. Like, so I'm just arms up, holding on to the crank and the fork leg, pulling it into the sort of top of my shoulders. The thinking behind that is if I'm ever starting to fall and it's me or the bike, the bike's going. So I tried to not have it properly attached to me in any way. There are a few sort of devices that you can use that make things a bit easier, and I use them on and off occasionally, but sometimes they were just a bit difficult to use. When you're on your own and in the mix, it just became a bit hard going. So yeah, I used to just, for the most part, carry it across my shoulders, and then on the odd occasion, namely the cooling, I would take the wheels off and strap everything individually just straight to my pack. So again, not to me, but I would run an inner tube around my bag and through the frame and through both wheels and sort of hook it in over the pedals and then use an extra couple of straps just to secure it. And that's how I sort of done any proper climbing.
Gosh, that's really fascinating thinking about the setup of the bike and, of course, safety first. Because when you were talking there about Leothach, I remember my own experience of doing that. And I mean, I vividly remember some of those down climbs. And I was thinking, how on earth did he get a bike down there? Even Anachigich with the down climb and the little pinnacles as well, getting the bike across there. And of course, Anchellach. So did you study the route quite extensively beforehand, before you did a mountain? So say you're hurtling along on the mountain bike in a little path and then all of a sudden there's a big drop or a massive down climb. What did you do? Like, how did it work?
Again, all kind of each sort of mountain was taken individually. On the sort of more overbearing ones, like say Leotak, for example, I worried more about Leotak than I did any of the cooling. Whenever I was in Torridon, it was just the mountain that I'd look up at and I'd think, how the hell do I get a bike up or down that?
I mean, to be fair, I was just thinking that, but without a bike, so yeah.
Yeah. When you're in Skye and you're looking up at the cooling, like all the corries are incredible to ride. So you know that you've only really got the top half of the day to worry about. But when you look up at Leotak, it's just so imposing. So with Leotak, a few of the more difficult mountains that involve treacherous ridges, I was able to come from sort of both ends. So for Mulach, I went from the west end of Leotak and parked in the car park for Benalligan and sort of went around the back and just traversed up the heathery, awful climb. And I'd done it in full winter conditions. But it was a beautiful, beautiful day. Bluebird, nice crispy snow when I got to the summit. Probably spent about 40 minutes up there just taking it all in. And then retraced my steps on the way back. So that one was fine. There was no particularly precarious bits other than, dropping off the summit itself. And then for Spidian, I'd done that quite near the end. Again, another beautiful day, but it was nearly 30 degrees. And for that one, I didn't take the wheels off the bike at all. I just had it, again, rested on my back. And it wasn't nearly as bad as I anticipated it was going to be. Climbing out of the corrie up onto the ridge was the most difficult bit, and even that ended up not being too bad. So for me, it was a lot of fuss about nothing. And I've got Walk Highlands to sort of thank for most of that. That's where I done most of my research. Just reading various people's reports, going through the Munro's book, and just sort of cross-referencing everything about the best way to tackle things. I'd done the same with the Inaccessible. I'd done the first one from Glencoe Village, just as a simple out and back, and then for the other end, I went up the back from sort of Kinlochleven. Again, just missing out the most treacherous bits, because for me it's about finding the best riding, like not necessarily doing the full route. And to go across the Inaccessible, I know there's not a great deal of riding. There's a section that was rideable, and I played about on that. But I wasn't getting paid to do this. The most important thing to me was getting home to my family at the end of the day. So it was just about having the most fun without, risking my life.
Like the smallest of slips and the smallest thing can happen. And I guess, speaking about that and speaking about tough days and things, after you did complete the challenge, life threw you a curveball. And a couple of months after finishing,
Mm.
you broke your neck in the biking accident. And I just wanted to ask if you felt able, if you could talk me through what happened.
Yeah, that's no problem at all. Yeah, so obviously I went 8.5 years and, nearly 300 mountains without any serious accidents. And then I've always been interested in racing, particularly racing downhill. And so I'd obviously during the course of the project, it was just such a monumental task. And whenever I had a free weekend, I wanted to do that I couldn't dedicate any time to racing. So I'd said when I finished that I'd get back into some races again. And there I think I had four lined up, and the first one back was a Scottish downhill event down at A Forest. Saturday, Sunday. The Saturday went relatively simple. The weather stayed at bay, was feeling okay. Then Sunday morning, a few more runs, and it was my final run before the race runs. And so it was just making my way down gently, just making sure I know all my lines, really, really relaxed, really, really chilled run, and dropping into the final bit of descent, which is called the elevator, which is basically it's like a 7 or 8 foot drop in a really steep sort of landing, which flattens out really quite quickly, and you gain quite a bit of speed. And I think I just sort of hit a compression at the bottom of that, and the bike sort of didn't react in a way that I was expecting, and I hit the ground at about 30 mile an hour and rattled my head off the finish barrier as well. I think I blacked out from what people have said. And the next thing I sort of knew, there was people all around me and over the top of me, and what I later found out to be a medic was there, and the first thing that came out of my mouth was, my hand is pins and needles, which was obviously quite alarming. And the first thing the medic said to me was, "Are you okay to sit up for me, love?" Um, so I never really thought too much of it. I got ushered straight off the track, straight into the medical tent. I was obviously screaming in pain, but I wasn't thinking, "Oh, my neck's broken," because I'd just been walked off to the side. After a few further checks, there were some questions like, is there anybody to take you to the hospital? It's like, no, I'm here on my own. From their side, it wasn't, enough of an emergency for an ambulance or a chopper. So again, it was just kind of all downplayed in my head. So I went about my day, got some help to put away the tent and put away the bike, and decided that, well, if I need to go to hospital, I want to do it nearer to home. So I drove 160 miles up the road just thinking I'd damaged my shoulder, to be honest. I just felt a bit stiff. Got straight up to 9 Miles Hospital, walked in, triage nurse knew something was up pretty much straight away. And, within sort of half an hour of walking at A&E, I was told, do not move, we think you've broken your neck. And that was it. The next 4 days I was in there and I'd broken 4 vertebrae, with the C7 being the worst. And, I remember just lying in bed and the consultant sort of speaking to me about like what had happened and what to expect from it, because obviously they're really concerned. And he said somebody must have really been watching over you, because not even just the accident itself, but the fact then that I walked about all day and then drove 160 miles home. Anything could have happened on that journey. It's in my head, it's a miracle that I'm still alive. Never mind walking.
Yeah, oh my gosh. When you were told that you've broken your neck, did it kind of the severity of it, did it hit you quite quickly or did it take a wee while before that happened?
I don't know. I mean, I think there was bits of worry all sort of throughout those initial hours. But I think in my head, because it had been downplayed so much at the start, I couldn't really get into my head that anything serious had happened. I remember I stopped at Sterling Services on the way home for a bite to eat, and like I'd phoned my wife just to let her know, because obviously she was concerned about me driving after having an accident and stuff. And I told her how stiff I was when I was walking back to the truck. And she was like, what if you've broken your neck? And I was like, I've not broken my neck. Like, I'm driving home. Um, so then to be lying in the hospital bed, after the initial x-rays and stuff, I don't know, I don't really felt like it, I never felt like it was real. But then I think when I was told that I had broken it, like everybody around me seemed to get a bit more panicky, and that sort of made me, I sort of mirrored their energy with it all. And I think it kicked in a little bit then, like how, what if things are going to go from bad to worse here? What if there's, something that could sever something? And yeah, I mean, there was a lot going through my head. You know, we we got lucky, I suppose, very, very lucky.
Yeah, incredibly lucky. I cannot believe that you drove so far with a broken neck and not even realize that you had a broken neck. That's
Yeah,
yeah, that's absolutely crazy. And I suppose the first thing that would have crossed your mind would be how is this going to affect family life? But then, of course, maybe after that, you start to think about, well, how is this going to affect your adventuring and getting out in the mountain bikes? When the thing that you love injures you, how do you rebuild that relationship?
I don't know. Like, I think it must be something about mountain biking, because obviously you see people who have these horrible accidents, like doing the thing they love, and a lot they can't bear to look at it again, because it brings all the sort of negative energy about it. But I went totally the opposite way. It felt like, as soon as sort of the ability to go out on my bike, or even just be outside or in the hills, or go away camping with the kids, or like as soon as all that was taken away, like I just wanted it more, particularly the biking. Like I just got so obsessed with biking. Like I consumed so much mountain bike media at the beginning of this injury, and right through, probably more than I've ever consumed any other time in my life. I was reading sort of every article online, watching every edit that came out, going through my own footage, hooked on social media, and sort of what other people were doing and what was missing out. And yeah, like I was just really, really excited about getting back out again. Like I don't have any, there's no love lost over biking. My wife, maybe thinks a little bit differently about that.
Yeah.
She has reservations about me getting back to it, but we've had some chats about it. And day to day, for the last sort of 10 years, I've been a scaffolder. And there's a lot more risk involved with that in my head than riding my bike, which feels second nature. But I couldn't possibly imagine the idea of taking away the thing that I love to prevent another accident.
Yeah.
Like that just doesn't sit well with me at all.
The fact that you're just so desperate to get back to it, I think that that's one of the things that will get you through this as well. Did you give yourself a challenge or an aim or a goal for, what you want to do? So when you recover, is there maybe one thing that sticks out that you want to achieve on the mountain bike after this?
To be honest, all of my sort of goals have remained the same throughout it. Everything that I'd sort of been thinking about when I finished the Munro was like future projects and bigger adventures and sort of media things that I want to do. They're all still in place. Like doing this hasn't put any of that off or brought any of it forward in any way. I think the thing that I'm most looking forward to regarding this neck brace is just going riding with my son again. Like he's my number one fan. He's my best mate. Like he's the person that I go riding with the most. And 2 weeks before I done this, he just got a new bike, and then obviously all of a sudden we couldn't go anywhere. Dad can't ride. Dad can't even drive, and it's eaten me alive that not only have I taken this away from me, I've taken my son's favorite pastime away from him as well. I would like to get a ride with my son before Christmas. That's the moment. That's the ultimate goal.
Being a parent as well, I'm big on life lessons for my daughter, she's going to be 15 in February. Honestly, Sean, just by what you're saying about your determination and how you're handling this, I think although you're not getting out there with your son, it sounds like this is such a positive life lesson for him, seeing his dad and how you're coping with this and how you're handling it and how you're reframing it as well and having that aim of getting out before Christmas. I just think that's absolutely beautiful. And I know that your son's going to take so much from this.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for chatting with me. This has just been so inspirational. Just before we finish up, the strapline to Adventure Unfiltered is "In the wild, we remember who we are." And I wanted to know what that means for you.
Hmm. I mean, for me, what I love about just being in the outdoors and particularly like in the hills and as far in the wilderness as I can get is how insignificant I am. Nothing that I'm worried about or care about or any of the world's problems or health issues, like nothing matters, I find. Like when I'm out in the hills, like it's just me in the hills and that's it. There's nothing else to think about. Everything else is stripped back and it's like a drug. Like it keeps me wanting more because you just chase that. There's nothing can bother me out there. The solitude and just the sights and the sounds and yeah, there's just something really special about it.
I feel exactly the same when I'm in the outdoors. Everything's stripped back and nothing else matters. Thank you so much for listening to this conversation with Sean. There's something incredibly powerful about the way he holds joy, grief, fear, and determination all at once without pretending to be anything other than exactly who he is. His story reminded me that curiosity can take us further than confidence, and the mountains carry our memories, and that strength often looks quieter than we expect, and that adventure isn't perfection or performance, it's about feeling alive. This is what we're exploring here, not the polished moments, but the real ones, not the summit shots, but the stories behind them, the messy, meaningful, unfiltered side of adventure. If this episode resonated with you, it would mean the absolute world to me if you shared it, left a review, or sent it to someone who needs a reminder of what adventure can teach us. Thank you for being here, for listening, and for joining me on this journey. So until next time, keep going, keep exploring, and remember, in the wild, we remember who we are.